So for this week, I asked you to read an article that talked about how you report your findings. And then your chapter focused on a lot of other things. And so there are ways of reporting what you have analyzed during your project, and then other things that we need to focus on as well. And one thing I wanted to talk about specifically was the fact that there really is not just one way to write up your findings. There's different styles, such as for anything that you do. You know, you can do posters, you can do manuscripts, you can do webcasts, you can do tons of things. But in terms of how you report qualitative findings, that can be a little tricky. There really is no one style for writing up qualitative methods. Often when you have your analyses, you're looking for a central point or a central concept that might relate to other concepts. And there you might, really explain these core concepts that you find in your data. What you're trying not to do is just retell what you've learned from the people you've interviewed or the observations you've made. What you're trying to do is break apart the data like you've done in your analysis activities that we've done, where we found different themes and put them into little pots and put in our ideas of what are these themes and what do they mean and what are good examples of them. But then analyzing this analysis to interpret it, to put it all together and summarize it in some way. So you're taking one story to connect with other stories, seeing what's similar or different, and creating a whole new knowledge. So I'm going to go on and talk about this. So when you talk about qualitative write-ups, it's very similar to what you would read in any kind of article, no matter what the data is. There's an abstract, and you're talking about the background information and what your aims for your project were and what was in the literature, where the gaps are. And then you talk a lot about your methods. What did you do? Did you use a theoretical framework to inform your questioning and your findings? What was your sample? How did you recruit? How did you collect the data? What type of data? How did you manage the data and analyze it? And then in qualitative, sometimes because there is so much connectivity between the researchers and the people who you're talking with, and that the researchers are working with the data and bringing themselves into what they see in the data, you might have a little section on the team that's working with the data and a little bit about reflexivity. How might who you are, your discipline, your background, your political stance actually impact your ability to look at the data, what you found in it. Then in terms of reporting your findings, which are the results section, you might just report your findings and then have a discussion, or you might combine that because it's already qualitative to begin with, so why not discuss your findings as you report them? They also have strengths and limitations, where a lot of the limitations will be inherent to just the qualitative process. Talk about trustworthiness of the findings and conclusions and implications of your work. So here's an example of an abstract from a really interesting study from 2011. And the aim was to generate a theoretical model, so it's grounded theory, that illuminates the experiences of school counselors and school nurses counseling teenage girls who worry about problems related to protection of family honor. They used interviews, and they had a very small sample, and they used grounded theory to generate this new knowledge. And so what we're looking at here is that they're in the abstract, you're looking for what is the purpose of the work? What were the specific aims? What methods were used? What were the findings? And possibly, what are some of the implications of those findings? Just like other articles. Now, in terms of theoretical frameworks, I'd like to discuss a student's work that you've read. You read at the beginning a study that looked at understanding the social ecological factors that act as facilitators and barriers to college success among UAF students who identify as being military veterans. So I worked with a student on this project, and it was really, really fascinating. And what we see here is her her poster that came from this work, and she worked with other students on this, so it wasn't like she was just working alone. So she had people coming in and helping, which gave different perspectives, which was wonderful. And you see here that she is showing her background, which is sort of from the literature, her study goal, and her theoretical framework. So you don't have to go into a study with a theory in mind, but she knew that she wanted to use a social ecological model, and we'll talk about this in a second. And this informed not only her project, but her questions that she asked and how she analyzed her information. Then in the middle, you see she talked about her methods, how she, recruited people and collected data, and what her interview questions focused on, and how she managed and analyzed her data and her ethics. And then she presents her findings, which include the demographics of the people that she spoke with, because you want to be able to tell a little bit about who you're speaking with, and then maybe that will help when you're giving your findings to do comparisons between different demographic categories, or just to see if somebody's giving some information, what type of person that person was, what characteristics aligned with that person. So here at the bottom, you see interview findings in the center, and it says, she's focused on the question, what people, places, services, or things have made it easy or challenging to maintain your status as a UAF student veteran? And those are put together in terms of this organizational framework or the social ecological model. And then if you look at the right, she talks a little bit more about her findings, and she discusses the implications and what she plans to do next. And it's a really nice, very beautiful poster. So to talk a little bit more about how she used the theoretical framework, the social ecological framework is very similar to the biopsychosocial model, where you're talking about, in this case, how do people, what factors influence well-being in terms of the individual, such as their knowledge, attitudes, experiences, or behaviors, their relationships with others, so in terms of their interpersonal relationships or the support they receive. And then for her, she focused on the organization or the community, because she's talking about students at UAF. So what is the social climate like? What are the norms and programs and resources available? Okay, because she knew that if she was going to hear about people's lives as students and military veterans, she had to understand what it was like for them, not just internally to themselves, but how they related to others, and how the organization, the university, and the community environment impacted how they were able to succeed as students. And this helped her frame her questions. So her interview questions included, but were not limited to these. So at first she starts by saying, before I begin with my questions, is there anything you want to just tell me? Because a lot of times people just want to get things off their chest before they start dealing with your questions. And then she wanted to do something very overall. What has it been like for you to be a UAF student veteran? Just to have them start reflecting on that, because people have many different identities. So they had to start reflecting on themselves as student veterans. And then she says, what people, places, services, and things have made it easy for you to become and to maintain your standing as a student at UAF? And here's where she brought in the social ecological framework. She listened to see what they said, and then she prompted on things she didn't quite get. She prompted on individual level factors, such as their personal motivations, their skills, or their ability to ask for help from others, their relationships with others, prompting on support that they received and different types of people and resources that they used. And then she talked about community and organizational facilitators, such as facilities and the environment of UAF. And then in terms of societal, she talked about spiritual factors, such as faith, religion, or church. So I'm going to stop here, and then we'll visit this a little bit more later, and when we talk about findings. So we'll take a break right now.